Susan, thank you so much for joining us here on the Science of Psychotherapy podcast. So great to see you.
Yes, thank you, Matthew, and you, Richard, as well.
Yes, I'm here as always. This is so wonderful to have you join us with this really interesting an important perspective. The book, Heart Open, Body Awake, that in itself is fabulous. But then you get a colon and you get 4 steps to embodied spirituality. All this just grasped our attention. But before we get into all that fabulous stuff, and as we sort of break down all the wonderful elements of the book, maybe just a little, what's got you into this point here with that book? Because there are a few other books in your stable, and you've been around a while doing a lot of things. We've given an introduction, but could you fill us in with the real stuff?
Well, the real stuff is that I started in somatics and psychology simultaneously, really. I grew up in both, and I worked pretty hard to keep them separate. They didn't have a lot of credibility in each other's fields. And I was able to, keep them separate for a little bit, but in the 90s, I started really blending the two, and that's when I developed body-mind psychotherapy. And that's when, here in the States, the somatic psychology or body psychotherapy world was really taking off. And it was an exciting time for all of us, and a time where we were really pushing the envelope and hoping that we would get to the point where we are today, where most psychotherapists all over the world, I think, realize that there's some practicality and importance of including the body.
It's such a fascinating thing. My wife is a body worker. She's a massage therapist of quite some repute, but also she works with lifestyle medicine, and she's a nurse as well. And one of the things we did a bit of a paper a little while ago, a few years ago, just talking about that arguably around 70% of the body of our biology does nothing but move us. That's all it does, the bones, the muscles, and so on and so forth. And so to not consider that the movement of this biology is a fundamental part of our mental experience is just, to us, odd. And I think this is what you would get. You guys, Pat Ogden, we've had lots of conversations with her. I know you know her. She did a lovely review of your book. So what was it like, though, feeling this transition of the acceptance through those 90s years?
It was really exciting and really fun on the one hand, and on the other hand, I always felt a lot of imposter syndrome, even though we didn't have that phrase back then. I always in my life feel, a little bit like, the witch, and someone is going to burn me at the stake soon,
Always an encouraging morning thought, yeah.
But, the exciting part was really what you guys do, all the support of the sciences that we were all drawing from and sharing with each other and inviting the scientists in to teach us. And, you just talked about 70% of our biology being about movement. There were neuroscientists, can't remember their names. In my second book, I probably won't be able to find it, but I quoted, I think it was Spanish maybe, some neuroscientist who was big somewhere in some important university. He said that our brains are fundamentally and primarily about movement. That's how the brain evolved. So if you think about primitive organisms, getting big enough, multicellular organisms, getting big enough that they needed a nervous system. Yeah. Before the nervous system developed, it was all chemical communication within the organism. And then once you got big enough, you needed, just at the beginning, it was just like a circle of nerves for the starfish.
Yeah.
And a web of nerves for the sea squirt.
Yeah.
There was no central nervous system. It was just passing motor impulses. That's inarguable. That's how the nervous system evolved, was to help us coordinate movement from one end of an organism to another.
And speed of communication, and we did some stuff for that for the book. And just a couple of fun facts, which is kind of cute. I was rereading the other day, is DNA sort of eventually made itself happen and took about 500 million years, and then it formed a sort of membrane around it. So our first cell, the Luca, the last universal common ancestor, took about 700 million years. Then it was 3.5 billion years before a nerve, a fast communication network started up. So sponges had nothing, and jellyfish, away they went. And as you say, the sea squirts and so on and so forth. But it was a long time before it became unnecessary. But we've done an awful lot in 600 or 700 million years with that little bit of connection, hence us. But it goes beyond. Something comes beyond that because of that experience. Now, we call it, I would say this word, spirituality. That's how human beings engage with it. We don't know what other species do because we can't talk to them. But that is an important part. I mean, we're talking embodied spirituality, so just talking about the body. What is that? How does that come about to be a connected framework?
So my theory is, and there's some scientific support for this, that spirituality is an innate template that we can follow back to other animals earlier in the evolutionary process than us. Clearly, all life is interdependent. So much of what we call spirituality is our sense of oneness, our sense of being a part of a larger whole, our sense of connectedness and connectivity. And then we develop all of the various religious ideas that we can argue about, we can fight about, we can say, my God is the one true God, and your God, isn't a real God, and, all of the crazy stuff that we do, but that hasn't really helped people. And I was telling you earlier about this great book, new book, The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller. And she's simultaneously a brilliant research psychologist at Columbia. I think she was at the National Institute of Health. And she's a serious number cruncher, and she's crunching a lot of, numbers of longitudinal data. And what she saw is that people that reported themselves to be highly religious but not spiritual, that category did not have the same psychological resilience as the people that reported themselves to be highly spiritual, whether they were religious or not. I think her basic question, I think, is something like, how important is spirituality? Is your personal spirituality in your life? And for those with high levels of personal importance of spirituality, she can crunch the numbers in a way that shows that that is the single most significant indicator of resilience from depression. The single biggest indicator of everything.
That's so fascinating. And because Matt and I talked about this before in various spiritual aspects and religious aspects, and there's this one of attuning yourself or ascribing yourself to an external influence. And then you've got something which I suppose Buddhism is the most generalized understanding of that, which is much more about ascribing and internalizing a sense of ability to access something that is greater. And that's a different process. And what I get when I think about it is I get a circular motion when I move back towards that. Is that relevant? You're beautifully nodding your head, so I'm hitting something that you find.
Yes, absolutely relevant, I think. In terms of the sense of interdependence, the sense of being part of a larger whole, then inner and outer become continuous.
Ah, yes.
Right? And so even if you start on the outside and, if you start with, a prayer to whatever, please help me, if it doesn't circle back around and come through you, then it's empty. I had a talk with a minister recently, and she said, sometimes I feel God and sometimes I don't feel God. And, it felt sad to me because it felt like, there's such a struggle in the organized religions where you get abandoned so frequently. And you feel, it's like being beached as a whale. You're just washed up on shore and you don't know how to get back into the water. And that, that's why I think the embodiment part is so important, both in psychotherapy and in spirituality and in the continuity between the two. And I think they became discontinuous. Our sense of psychology and spirituality became discontinuous for the same reasons that our spirituality has become so cognitive and so bereft of heart and human connection, because we have practiced living more and more in the virtual reality of our brains, and we've gotten better and better at ignoring the direct experience of our bodies.
Yes,
there was a small setback. Now, just quickly in there, then you jump in. But just a small setback that religions actually took on a controlling mechanism, and they tended to sort of, kill you, if
or kill the other guys.
Didn't cognitively agree. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, no. I was just thinking that, this is one of the problems that when you're talking about embodiment and our approach to it. So when talking about psychotherapists approaching embodiment, we often come at it from a very cognitive place rather than a more organic place. Maybe you can talk to us a bit about what that more organic approach would be.
Well, I think the more organic approach becomes viable when it starts with the psychotherapists themselves. Mm-hmm. So that, and this is a problem with a lot of young somatic psychotherapists, they're like, okay, how do I get my client into their bodies? And it becomes an act of aggression rather than, I want to learn to live in my body more and more of the time, 100% of the time, potentially, to live in my body when my client is severely depressed, to live in my body when my client is sharing really scary stuff, to live in my body when I am frightened or angry, And so if we can do that, then I call my psychotherapeutic work body-mind psychotherapy. Mm. If we can work with our own embodiment, then we can start with what the client wants, whatever it is. Love, a new job, whatever it is, and help them feel when their body wakes up and moves forward with their goals.
This just reminds me. I learned a lot about psychotherapy in acting school. People have got a bit bored with that, but I was an actor for 20 years or so. But we had this amazing movement teacher, we called it, named Keith Bain, who was quite famous in Australia, passed away. And I remember I used to take my head to class, and then I would sort of get into movement. But when Keith entered the room, there was this entity that shone out, and literally shone out from his chest. His chest entered the room first. His heart entered the room first, and it took me a few years to get it. But I really believe I did get it. And this is what you're describing. That I haven't sat with you yet, but I have spent some time with Pat Ogden, and this entity enters the room that we call Pat Ogden, but we don't have. It's quite fascinating, and I think the thing that you're just starting to do it, and I wanted to talk about this because you talk about things like wonder and joy. Great, we all love that, but you also say, but there's pain and there's death and there's difficulty, and these are all. We try to disconnect them, or do we try to disconnect them? But we shouldn't. What's your talk about there in the book?
Well, again, I kind of have to go back to my psychotherapeutic work, because what I haven't said yet is that as I began integrating somatics and psychology, I was still keeping my meditation and spirituality practices in the closet. And feeling like, okay, well, I'm mixing these two, but I shouldn't bring this one in because that's heresy. Right. And so I was keeping that in the closet, and more I realized, oh, this is ridiculous. This is a continuity. This is human development. This is maturation, potentially. Yeah. So, the way that Western culture is set up at this point is in psychological exploration is, first work through the darkness, right? And, I don't know, will that change in 50 years? But we're so steeped in, looking at the early issues, looking at early childhood, looking at the pain and the trauma and the dysfunctional families, and coming to understand that and coming to feel in our bodies how that left its legacy. Yeah. So that seems to be the first, and, in conventional approaches to psychology, the complete process. But what I've seen for, thousands of people is that then can we emerge from what I call in the Heart Open, Body Awake book, from the egoic emotions, which need attention even in a spiritual context. When they come up, they take priority. You're mad, you're frightened, you're grieving. These things need attention. If there's a traumatic dimension to any of those or all of those, then they need even more attention more quickly. But can we make a relationship to those things, to our basic anxiety, to our basic depressions, and hold them in a way that allows us to then still find this larger sense of meaning, sense of connection, sense of personal identity, so that the personal identity shifts from, I am a child of a dysfunctional family, my mother did this, my father did this, and, I've been crippled for life. Or to become, yes, I had this history, and I have truly grappled with it, and truly loved it, and healed it, and made peace with it, and I can begin to shed it. I can begin to dismantle this, what Wright called armor, but, it's more of a, an encasement of mind, a smallness of identity that we all live within, for much of our lives. can I let these, what I call in the Heart Open Body Awake book, transcendent emotions. So we've got egoic emotions, and we've got, I think I call them transcendent. I changed a lot, but something, you know what I'm saying, peace, joy, love, expansion, connection, intimate relationship, but not just sexual intimate relationship with, you know, as the Native American people say, all of my relations, you know, which means everybody, not just the humans, not just the animals, but everything. Yeah. And, you know, it's such a powerful thing in terms of healing psychological issues to have a glimpse beyond them and into a larger sense of, I remember when I was very young, my husband was also a psychotherapist when we were young, and I was deep in the throes of some kind of old pain, and he said, you know, your history has, no, your essence has nothing to do with all of your history. And I, you know, to hear that in the depths of despair, you know, to hear a message like that, that kind of, you know, became a thread that helped me move, you know, along with many, many other things, but that helped me heal my own issues and open up to a larger sense of who I am.
Yeah.
And a deeper sense, and a more important, more profound sense.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so then to start to be able to help others do that, and to start to see, you know, perhaps the real deal isn't about healing. Perhaps the real deal is looking beyond the healing to a larger sense of human life, human community, ways of being together.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Now, let's have a talk about the book and the structure of the book, because you've got this beautiful 4 steps of embodiment that I think provide a wonderful structure to step us through, and you weave the science and spirituality and everything together. So just give us a little bit of a sense of how you step us through those 4 steps.
So the 4 steps are open, feel, allow, and connect. I think that's right.
That's right.
And let's start with open, because it's the first, but also open is important in terms of our brains, because really the first thing that has to happen as adults is our brains have to decide, this is a good idea to open up to all this other stuff other than just my mentally fabricated virtual world. And that's hard to do, because so long as we're alive, our brain wants to continue as we've been doing. The brain is the habituated part of our beings. You know, everything has pattern. You know, all elements on the planet have patterns, but the brain is the one that clings to the pattern, that clings to the homeostasis, that clings to the repetition, that just says, hey, you know what? It might not be perfect, but we're alive, so don't rock the boat. And, you know, I can laugh about it right now, but that clinging to what has been is torture for all of us, right? Everybody knows, every adult knows how torturous it is to live within the confines of our habituated behaviors and thoughts. So to persuade the brain to, you know, open things up a little bit is, you know, a magic trick, and we all do it in a million different ways. And You know, we cross our fingers and it's all a bit jerry-rigged. And you know, it's just by hook or by crook getting in there to the brain, you know, and you all in your work talk a lot about mind science, and I don't know if you talk about mind body.
Oh, yes, you know? We do a lot. Yeah.
So the purpose for me of mind body approach is to convince the brain that it's okay to try a body mind approach.
Yeah, because my mentor's Ernest Rossi. And so we look to the brain, the cognitive brain being the observer, to notice what the body is sending us through these ideodynamic responses, rather than the brain is telling the body what to do. The brain is noticing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and so then to take that a step further, to kind of formally demote the brain from all supreme, all powerful leader to consultant.
Yeah.
So the brain can say, hey, you know, I've noticed that you're always doing it this way and it's really not working that well. And, you know, you might want to check in with somebody else in our team here.
Yeah. I've got an idea.
Yeah. I've got an idea that this person over here has an idea that we should listen to.
That's the difference. And this is where it just slides into that second part, feel. You know, we open, then we can feel. Is it sort of a stepped process, this? But anyway, just don't stop interrupting. Keep going.
Stepped, and it's circular, you know, and terribly, terribly repetitive in any given moment. You know, you can just zip all the way through, or you can open and then hit your head against the wall, and then open again and hit your head against the wall, you know, whatever is needed. But, you know, to go from just thinking, oh, the body's a good idea, you know, and let's mention it occasionally, to actually putting in lots of time feeling.
Yeah.
What do I feel now? What do I feel now? How do I feel this deep inside my core? I had a couple in my office. They were both body psychotherapists, and they were, you know, it was pretty gnarly what they were dealing with. And I said, okay, let's just pause, feel your body. And I didn't see much shift. And I said, what are you feeling? And one of them said, well, I can feel my butt against the chair. And I said, you know what? You're going to have to dig a lot deeper than that if you want to get through this.
Mm. That's right. But that was a starting point, I guess. Yeah.
But you know, it was a starting point for people that had already put in a lot of time.
Yeah.
You know, so the recalcitrance of our brains of really, you know, really diving in, really feeling, you know, it requires, you know, a lot of commitment. And a lot of times what gets us to make that commitment is, you know, extreme pain, extreme difficulty.
It draws our attention. Keith used to teach us to feel with our back and to feel with our knees. And I also, back then as an actor, but also if I were a client, I would think, what are you talking about? But once it starts to happen, once you start to go, my knee has got it, and we've got a name for it, you know, this proprioception, this. And we talk about that a lot in polyvagal theory as well, as one of the ways in which our body is able to speak to us about our sense of stability and our sense, our feeling, as you're saying, of where our joints are in space. I mean, we think it's a head thing, but it's not. It's a body thing. It's so true.
Yeah, so that's an example, isn't it, Richard, of coming at it from a purely somatic perspective rather than a cognitive perspective, because I think we can try and cognitively appraise and appreciate and sort of get what the soma is doing. But as you say, that it doesn't really get us there. It doesn't get us deep enough.
Let me rephrase that, Matthew. See if I understand what you're saying. So I think that, our brains noticing the sensations, whether they're proprioceptive or, whatever else in our bodies, that's mind-body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then the next step, the allow step, shifts us into body, mind, or body.
Right. Yeah.
Because I can observe what's happening. Oh, I'm getting a little nervous in my gut here. Okay, I noticed that, but I can hold it really still and try to control it mentally. Or I can feel my gut and I can let that be the center, let that be the leader. What are you telling me? What am I listening for here? I can surrender my cognition to my experience.
So this is a sensation when you're meditating, when you that point where you drop down from your head into your body. That's how I would explain it.
Yes. And for some people it happens when you're meditating. For some people it happens never. For some people it happens out in nature, making love, whatever it is that you shift and you go, oh, it's a lot better this way.
that sense of that experience of wonder and amazement, which so what are you thinking now? And you say nothing. I can't put words to this. Those are some of the things, and that's probably a really good thing for a client to say as an indicator, I suppose. Are these sorts of sometimes, the verbal where they don't say anything, but these things come from the client?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm thinking of somebody I just spoke to earlier in the week, and she's somebody that I have known since she was a very young woman, terrible trauma history. And, she said to me this session, we only speak once every few years, she said, you grew me up. And,
wow.
And so something was happening. She was, taking a step in her life and she was afraid. And, she's just shed so many fears and aggressions toward herself and others. And she was going like this. And I said, can you look at me now? And she goes like this. And she said, I can't look at you. I'm so guarded. I've always been so guarded. And I just said, can you look at me now? And she kept her hands here and she looked up and she started to cry. And I can't remember anything more after that, but I think we talked about, you can do this. You can take this next step. You're safe now. Your life is safe. Your life is stable. Of course, never perfectly safe, perfectly stable, but good enough.
Yeah.
And, and she was able to bring her hands down and she kind of looked around and, it was a moment.
So this would be part of this fourth step, connect.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm just rather taken by the fact of you saying, and I can't really remember what happened there. I'm sort of thinking of, the right brain to right brain stuff that we get from Alan Shaw and various other people, but also body, because with Ernie Rossi, we would just have periods of time where both client and therapist would have no particular cognitive memory of the experience, but in some, when we had observers or when we had video, we'd go, oh, look at all the stuff that was going on, movements in the body and so on and so forth. And I've seen this with some of the videos that Pat's shown and Peter Levine has shown. And so this process, as you talk through the book, and you give lots of activities and exercises and ways in which people can experiment and test that's of course very important.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know yet. This is an experiment for me, Richard. I know it was important in psychotherapy. And now that I'm coming out of the closet, so, it's been 15, 17 years since my last book, which was Body, Mind, Psychotherapy. And I've been working on this embodied spirituality concept since then, but not so much in public, not little bits of teaching, but not, in a big way. And so now I'm learning to understand, what do we need to do here to recognize that spirituality is an innate part of our beings, to recognize that, as Thomas Hora, he's a psychiatrist, I don't know if he's still alive, but he said a long time ago, all problems are psychological and all solutions are spiritual.
Wow. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. So how do we take that into our lives outside the realm of psychotherapy? And, and own our spirituality and claim it, and claim the uniqueness of each of our spiritual paths. There has to be difference, tremendous difference here. It seems like that's, the prescribed paths of religion is what has dehumanized religion.
Yeah.
So how do we come together and support each other to find our unique paths, to practice together a little bit, because some practices are important for some of us and some are for the others. And, how do we open it up enough so that people are empowered individually and find meaningful ways to grow and mature, beyond the psychological, into this larger sense of self-unity, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such a beautiful description, and perhaps even not the teaser question, but that profound element. And we find that we have a sort of a time frame, with the podcast, where people have had enough, and it's around about this 40-minute mark, which we've been going for. So I'm just feeling that that's a wonderful thought to leave people with. Is there something else you'd just like to add to what we've been saying to round it up, or that we've missed before we sort of say goodbye and leave people with the opportunity then to go to your book and explore this further?
Well, thank you both for inviting me. It was fun to talk to you, and I'm so excited to always be in touch with, the furthest continent from me in my life. So welcome to all those down under. We're grateful for the experience, and we look forward to people talking to us and engaging and sending us their thoughts. I wonder if people just as they sit here and as they're experiencing now, wow, what are you feeling in your bodies right now as we talk about your bodies? This is a time to pause and reflect. So, but for now, we will say our goodbyes from this specific experience, but not our goodbyes for the beautiful spiritual experience that will continue on.
Thank you so much, Susan. See you later.
Thank you.